Well, Microsoft was the first software company where we wrote software for personal computers, and we believed that we could hire the best engineers. There was an unbelievable amount of software to be written, and we could do it well, and we could do it on a global basis. And the original customer base was the hardware manufacturers, and we sold to literally hundreds and hundreds, over 100 companies in Japan, over 100 companies doing word processors and industrial control type things. We knew in the long run we wanted to sell software directly to users, but we actually didn't get around that until 1980, when we had our first sort of games and productivity software that people would go to a computer store and actually buy the software package. We actually talked about it in an article in, I think, 1977 was the first time it appears in print, where we say a computer on every desk and in every home, and actually we said running Microsoft software. If we were just talking about the vision, we'd leave those last three words out. If we were talking an internal company discussion, we'd put those words in. And it's very hard to recall how crazy and wild that was. On every desk and in every home. At the time, you have people who are very smart saying, why would somebody need a computer? Even Ken Olsen, who had run this company, Digital Equipment, who made the computer I grew up with, and that we admired both him and his company immensely, was saying that this seemed kind of a silly idea that people would want to have a computer. When IBM saw that we had written the software for all the personal computers, they came to us, sought our advice on the design, but we said you should put a disk in, and since they wanted to ship very quickly, another company called Digital Research had done that work for the 8-bit machines, and they were starting to do a version for these new 16-bit machines. We convinced IBM to do a 16-bit machine using this 8086, 8088 processor. Well, Digital Research really hadn't finished the work, and then IBM was getting frustrated because Digital Research wouldn't sign even the non-disclosure agreement. And then some of us, particularly Paul and key person named Kazuhiko Nishi, who was from Japan and worked with us, said, no, we should just do that ourselves. And because of the quick timing, we ended up licensing the original code from another company and turned that into MS-DOS. And so then, subsequently, MS-DOS competed with this Digital Research CP/M. After about 2 or 3 years, MS-DOS became far, far more popular than CP/M. And then eventually we would take and add graphics capability on top of MS-DOS and then integrate the two together. And so today when we talk about Windows, it actually includes all those MS-DOS things in it. That's the full operating system. Although mostly you think of the graphics and the Windows and stuff, there's a lot of more classic operating system capability that's built in there. The IBM initial deal is a flat fee deal, another flat fee deal. It had certain restrictions that prevented IBM from selling to other hardware makers. So if people did IBM PC compatible machines, we would get the revenue by doing business directly with those people. And the deal was very complicated, but it was a deal that Steve Ballmer, who's a key person at the company by that time, and I thought a lot about, and it was a fairly junior team from IBM, and so we tried to make sure that given our belief that personal computers would be hyper popular, that Microsoft would get a lot of that upside. So they felt they got a very good deal, which they did, but as the industry expanded, we, for new versions and for different machines, we got that opportunity, even though they did not pay us a royalty. Even in the early days, if you set a computer on every desk in every home, and you'd say, okay, how many homes are there in the world? How many desks are there in the world? You know, can I make $20 for every home, $20 for every desk? You know, you could get these big numbers. But part of the beauty of the whole thing was we were very focused on the here and now. Should we hire one more person? If our customers didn't pay us, would we have enough cash to meet the payroll? You know, we really were very practical about that next thing, and so involved in the deep engineering that we didn't get ahead of ourselves. We never thought, you know, how big we'd be. I remember when one of the early lists of wealthy people came out, and one of the Intel founders was there. The guy who ran Wing Computers actually was still, Wang was still doing well. And we thought, boy, if the software business does well, the value of Microsoft could be similar to that. But it wasn't a real focus. The everyday activity of just doing great software drew us in. And some decisions we made, like the quality of the people, the way we were very global, the vision of how we thought about software, that was very long term. But you know, other than those things, you know, we just came into work every day and wrote more code and, you know, hired more people. And it wasn't really until the IBM PC succeeded, and perhaps even until Windows succeeded, that there was a broad awareness that Microsoft was very unique as a software company, that these other companies had been one-product companies, hadn't hired people, couldn't do a broad set of things, didn't renew their excellence, didn't do research. So you know, we thought we were doing something very unique, but it was easily not until 1995 or even 1997 that there was this wide recognition that we were the company that had revolutionized software. When I was very young, I hadn't been exposed to computers, so I was mostly just reading, doing math, learning about science, and I wasn't sure what my career would be. I knew I loved learning about things. I was an avid reader, but it was when I was 12 years old that I first got to use a computer, actually a very limited machine by today's standards. But that definitely fascinated me when I was first exposed. I was intrigued by figuring out what it could do and what it couldn't do, and some friends and I spent lots of time. The teachers got intimidated, so we were on our own trying to figure it out. Actually, we gave a course on computers to the other students, and it became, you know, a fascination where we got paid for doing computer work and talked about forming a company. But there was kind of a magical breakthrough when the computer became cheap and we could see that everyone could afford a computer. That was much later, but that's what got us to really get together and create a company for software. Yeah, math was the thing that came most natural to me. And, you know, you'd take these exams, some of which were sort of nationwide exams, and I did quite well on those, and that gave me some confidence. And I had some teachers who were very encouraging. They let me read textbooks. They encouraged me to take a college course on symbolic math, which is actually called algebra. So I felt pretty confident in my math skills, which is a nice thing because not only the sciences, but economics, a lot of things, if you're comfortable with math and statistics and ways of looking at cause and effect, that's extremely helpful. computers were immensely expensive and cost millions of dollars, a machine that was far less powerful than what you have in a cell phone today. And so that either you'd have a very important application or you just shared the machine with other people, and still you had to pay quite a bit of money. And so time sharing is where you're connected up and sharing the machine. It's a lot better than sending your programs in because you can see when you make a mistake pretty quickly. Even so, because they charge us so much, we'd actually type the programs offline on a paper tape so that we didn't have any delay for typing. And then when we got onto the computer, we'd feed in that tape so that there was less time online. But it gave you a sense of, okay, what you got right and wrong, and you could try and correct things. We also, because at that time the dominant form of computing was using punch cards, we actually did that quite a bit. We were down at the University of Washington and used some of those punch card systems. As computers became less expensive, so-called mini computers, then more people had access, mostly scientists and business people, but also we managed to find machines that weren't being used at night. The idea of a machine is something that an individual would use and that would just sit there idle when they weren't using it. That only made sense about a decade later when the work that we and others had done had gotten the price down so dramatically that the idea of a computer sitting idle, doesn't feel like some huge waste of resources like it did when they were so expensive and rare. I went through several phases of doing more complex programs where people who were great programmers would look at my work, give me feedback on it, and you get so you can be quite a good programmer. And it was kind of such an intense activity between the age of 13 and 17 that we learned a lot. Eventually, one of the programs we took on was the idea of the scheduling of our school. When should the classes meet? Who should be in which section? So you have all these requests for people who want different classes and keeping them small and not having the teachers teach too many classes in a row. Very complex kind of software problem. And actually, when the school first asked me to do it, when I was 15, I said that I didn't know how. And they asked some adults to do it, and that didn't work. And then about a year later, I'd figured out how to do it. And so my friends and I actually did the software that did all this high school scheduling. It had some fantastic benefits to us. We got paid for doing it. It was exactly the kind of complex problem that developed my skills very well. And we got some degree of control over who was in our classes, and so it combined the best of everything. Well, my parents had been fantastic throughout my whole student career. I mean, getting me to go to Lakeside, that my senior year at Lakeside, where I wanted to take time off and do this job at TRW, they'd been very supportive of that, letting me live down in Vancouver, Washington. I challenged them a little bit when some of my coworkers at TRW said I should skip undergraduate and just go to graduate school, and they were not enthused about that. It looked like I would have an opportunity to do that, but I didn't. I just went to Harvard, and that was another case where they were right that socially being with other undergraduates was good. I got to take graduate courses up at MIT, and I did that to a limited degree. So I kind of had the best of both worlds. Anyway, when it came time to go on leave from Harvard, the policies of the school about if you're gone, letting you come back are incredibly generous. And so if the enterprise had failed, then I would have been back. And so my parents were a little surprised and kind of wondering what it meant. but they were pretty supportive. And in fact, when we got into this legal dispute with Pertec, my dad gave me good advice. He was very supportive on that, and so we saw that through. And then as the company became successful, I hope they felt better about it. The only really bad case was if I stayed and the company was kind of mediocrely successful. If it failed, it would be okay. If it was a big success, it would be okay. And they could see I was very energized. And I thought, we needed to get in at the very beginning and not waste a year or two, which is what I had left of my undergraduate course requirements. Well, I think the American dream is this kind of a global dream now, that young people can come up with new ideas and create companies that make a contribution, not just jobs, but whatever their innovations that they bring about. Capitalism is this unbelievable open system that if you combine it with good infrastructure, good education, the creativity that we find for people who've had those chances is always going to surprise us. It's always going to come up with new seeds, new medicines, new software, new movies, things that are make the world a better place. Microsoft was at the center of the personal computer revolution, in particular the creation of a software market where you went out to lots of companies and encouraged them to write software for different applications, mundane applications, wild applications. That idea that you would encourage people to be creative and build software, and there'd be a whole industry around that. Microsoft believed in that, and no one else did. And so we got that going, and that's led now to where you have all these great choices, and it just keeps getting better and better. And it's because of the volume of machines out there, it can be sold very, very inexpensively. So that whole bootstrap, getting the industry going, making it personal, making there be lots of software, that's what we are the most proud of. The foundation got started in the late 90s with my dad encouraging me, an executive named Patty Stonecipher who left Microsoft, were helping out. I was still very busy. Our kids were very young, but we got going. We put computers in libraries in many different countries, including the United States. We did some scholarship things. We were learning about reproductive health and population issues, and that kept growing. And we met people who knew about vaccines, and so it was a part-time thing. Global health was a bit over half. The U.S.-focused library scholarship education work was over a quarter. And there was a final piece that relates to other things to help the poorest, other than just health things like finance and savings. And it grew. And then I saw that I could make a unique contribution there, and created a transition plan that was 4 years in the making. And so now I'm full-time at the foundation and playing a role of being the chairman and traveling a lot. So it's equally challenging. It's very fulfilling. It's taking these resources that I'm lucky enough to have because of the success of Microsoft and giving those back to the society in a way that can have the biggest impact.